Hello and welcome to Beech Grove on what's turned out to be another rather warm and muggy day, between the showers that is. It's a weather condition that's come to really characterise this growing season. First it's hot, then it's dry, and then we have an absolute deluge, which may be good for general growth in the garden, but it is a challenge for some plants. So for instance, this recently planted clump of Buxus spheres here, just look at the yellowing and the slight bronzing on particularly the young foliage. It's a classic sign that a plant that was previously nurtured in a pot in the nursery is now in the garden starting to struggle a little. So with plants like this, it's a good idea to get a good layer of organic matter and mulch not only around them, but to push the organic matter right underneath the canopy. Buxus, of course, very shallow rooting, very fibrous rooting, and they love having a nice, healthy organic matter mulch right underneath the skirt. And once you've done that, just give them a little bit of an injection of, well, it's sort of plant equivalent of steroids. It's a seaweed enriched with micronutrients. Do this about every 10 to 14 days, right through until the autumn. And you'll find the plants will really go into the winter strong, healthy and robust. Now, of course, you will have noticed that the apprentice has been left in charge of Beech Grove, which could be something of a disaster. But fear not, because Jim and Carole, they're just down the road.
Well, here we are, a few miles east on the outskirts of the city of Aberdeen. In fact, at the Aberdeen Royal Infirmary, a 900-bedded hospital serving the whole of the north of Scotland, 600,000 population.
And you know, we are going to be in a very special place on this huge campus. We are going to be at the Children's Hospital.
Yes, and that is a daunting prospect for parents and children alike. So we're off to meet a bunch of really dedicated and enthusiastic people who are transforming a really aura piece of ground into a naturally therapeutic garden, especially designed for children.
And you know, I think we are going to be meeting a few new friends.
Back at Beech Grove, in the depths of the secret garden, there's a plant here which is well worth paying attention to. This is Lamium orvala. It is the most incredible nettle relative. In very early spring, almost the first of the herbaceous perennials to come into flower, it has orchid-like blooms. You're just looking at the remains of them here that are well faded. But at this time of the year, as the plant starts to close down already, believe it or not, you can seize the opportunity by sneaking up behind it and propagating from it. Now this looks like one big batch, but in fact, if I come in here, you can see it's two clumps. So just spading around the back of one clump, and then if you open the plant up, put your spade in the middle and push through. There we go. And you can see, look at that, how vigorous and how enthusiastic this plant is to grow. Now obviously as a herbaceous plant like this, you wouldn't want to transplant it with such harshness without doing something to the top. So it's well worth going in and just taking the tops off. And you can do this with any of your early flowering herbaceous perennials that have finished flowering. Cut them back, things like geranium phaeums and that sort of thing. And you will most likely get a second flush of growth from this mat of foliage. But more importantly, that is good material to move elsewhere in the garden. Transplanting anything at this time of the year is always a bit of a challenge, and you do, in truth, run the risk of losing things unless you're careful with the process. So with something like the Lamium, the trimming back is going to significantly reduce the stress on the roots from the mass of foliage. It looks harsh, but dropping that in the hole a little deeper than it was originally planted. Backfill. This soil's already been improved with lots of organic matter and homemade garden compost. Firm the soil in to make sure the roots are in contact with that soil. And then, of course, the trick is just to water, water, and a bit more water, you won't be able to really over-soak them. The more water you apply, the more likely they are to settle in successfully. And within a few weeks, you'll get fresh foliage, which will recharge the roots, and the plant will be up and ready to roll for next spring. And talking about plants and how quickly they settle in, just have a look at these little geraniums here. This is Nodosum. This was planted end of April as little tiny 9 centimetre and 1 litre pots. And already they're doing exactly what we want them to do. Knit together and create that wonderful woodland understory with delicate blooms on them. Great plant for in the shade. There's Geranium phaeum here as well, planted at the same time. You can see that that's finished flowering. It's a very good plant for setting seed. If you have a much more relaxed approach to gardening, you don't mind the plant seeding around, just let it set seed. But on a young plant like this, if you allow it to set seed, it invests so much energy in the production of that seed that it can, in effect, starve the roots. So what I like to do at this time of the year is not give it a severe haircut, but just take off those flowering spikes. And that helps to keep the plant not only compact, but also, again, replenish the roots ready for next season. And these are just a couple of the geraniums that we tried planting here, all sorts of different shapes and sizes, just sort of exploring the genus, really. So we've got Wargrave Pink over here, which is a fairly broad and lax specimen. This is Westray, really super, succulent foliage, covered in bees. I mean, if you want a plant to sprawl around on the edge of the path or tumble over a wall, it's perfect. And then, same species, but this time a lighter pink form. This is Biacovo, doing exactly the same thing. And then there were some of the more vigorous plants too. How about Splish Splash at the back here? You can see why it's carrying the name Splish Splash. Great for mixing among the more informal plantings of things like Rosa rugosa. And then, how about this? One of my favourites, Lunix Star. Real beauty. Dark foliage, splashes on the leaf, and then really super coloured flowers. It shows you just how generous these geraniums are and how hard they work.
This is a very distinctive landmark here at Aberdeen. It's the Maggie Centre, and it provides all kinds of free support, whether it's emotional, practical or social, for people who have cancer and also for their families and friends. But you know, when you look at this building from a distance, to me it looks like a wonderful big white pebble sitting on a sea of grass. The garden is really calming because you've got these wonderful lime greens of the Alchemilla mollis, you've got the cool blues and the iris. Now, in a similar way, but with children especially in mind, is the project in hand today. And Jim is with David Tipping, who is the project leader and also the director of projects for the Archie Foundation.
Right then, David, how did this project get started?
Well, the hospital had reached its 10th birthday, and after 1 million children coming through its doors, it was starting to look a little bit tired.
Aye.
So as a charity, we got together and we thought, we've got to do something about this. So we approached some of the local big companies, and the Wood Group came forward and said, look, we can't give you the money, it's a lot of money, but we've got 7,000 staff, and actually they can fundraise towards the project, and actually they can come and get stuck in and help us.
Absolutely fantastic, isn't it? Yeah. Because they've come as a staff as well, or working, they're volunteered, and all the rest of it.
They're local people.
Now the site, I'm supposed to ask you what the site was like. I know what the site was like. It was like a commando course. Yeah. It was situated between the building and the car park, and nobody knew what to do with it. Yeah. But by jingo, you've transformed it. Yeah. Where do you see the benefits?
The benefits are huge. I mean, you know, we've created a bit of wow here. You know, kids will be excited to come here. There's distraction. They're
absolutely.
Off it. But
and we're not talking just about people who somebody's broken a leg and they're here for 20 days or something. Some families are involved here for quite a long time.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's families that have spent over a year in the hospital.
And what an opportunity to have it at their back doors.
So close to where they are, but they can actually just escape for...
The benefits of being in a garden environment are going to benefit the patients and the parents.
Absolutely, and when the parents are happy, the patients are happy.
Thanks for that.
Jake Dickey is in charge of implementing this design, and really is a big project, Jake.
Big project, but it's a big site.
So where are we at the moment on the
At the
plan?
moment here, we're just to the right of the main entrance. These wonderful creatures here, they're going to give all kids a wow and a laugh at the beginning.
They give
as
me
they
a
come in.
wow.
Aye,
I mean, you
exactly.
can't miss them.
You cannot miss them at all, and that's the whole idea, impact. And then back into the seating area on the right here. Kind of more contemplative for the parents, and the kids can play up and down all the paths and the meandering.
I mean, that's
ways.
important for the children, that
It
they,
is.
they can play
There's
here.
there's lots of ways they can approach this garden, and that's what it's all about, being in the garden and enjoying it.
Nice to have a few mature trees.
And the mature kind of trees giving a bit of a glade here, and then that gives you a bit of a break before you open it into this wonderful deck.
It's nice and bright.
It is bright, but that's all the impact for the children. And it'll get used as an outdoor classroom for the long-term patients here too, to give them a wee bit of fresh air. And leading up to the bridge here, we've got this dry riverbed. There's a feature beside the deck, so it can be looked down upon as
But
well as
perfectly
across.
safe.
Perfectly safe for the children. They'll be running across it.
Now, you
And-
mentioned children, Jake. I mean, it's not just about the children that are going to the hospital. It's the whole
The
family.
whole family here, the parents who come here and bring their other children with them while they're visiting their brothers and sisters, and they're going to be playing here. They're going to come along here. They're going to see these wonderful creatures we're walking up to now.
You say
And
the best
also
till last?
the elephants, and they're also going to approach from the car park. So this is going to be a wow for kids. And the idea here, the high planting here creates a jungle effect for these to be feeding on.
What, the jungle of Aberdeen?
The jungle of Aberdeen.
That's a first. Joe Mackey is chairman of the Archie Foundation. Is this the biggest project you've ever tackled?
It's certainly the biggest outdoor project we've done.
And what a result.
It is fantastic when you just see the transformation and what we've now created. You know, just the ambience, the whole environment, the friendliness that we've created with the animals and the plants, and it's just wonderful.
Well, Tony, I've been pointed in your direction because I want some information on money and maintenance.
Come to the right man.
And you are, on behalf of the company, you're at head of the volunteers, aren't you?
Absolutely.
First of all, tremendous beach plants, growing in pots, but I read somewhere that you're going to be putting in bare-rooted ones.
Well, Jim, as you know, the pot-growing plants are really quite expensive.
Aye.
In a project like this, every penny counts. So come in the autumn, we'll be planting some bare-rooted ones, which, as you know, is far more economical.
Quite a nifty idea because it'll look much better and give you a thicker... Now then, there's another one over here, maintenance. Now, we all see this finished and it's looking gorgeous and everything else, but things start to grow and things start to get out of hand. But where you can actually save on maintenance, and here's a classic example, soil's all made up.
Absolutely.
The fabric goes in there, the plants are in round, there's wonderful trees in, and then that'll stop any weeds coming through.
So much easier for everyone.
And it looks tremendous.
It's going to be great.
So you've cracked it. You've
I'm
got the
very
money
happy.
sorted and you've got the maintenance sorted. Good stuff.
I think that's about right, Laura. Okay. Now, Laura, would it be fair to say that you're Tony's deputy for
Yes,
this
for this
project?
project, yeah.
Yeah. And what's your involvement been?
So I was involved in the initial application for Beech Grove and fundraising and volunteering throughout.
Now, isn't it fantastic all these plants have gone in and we've got a bit of structure and a bit
Yeah.
height with things like the bamboos. I mean, what
Yeah.
do you think?
Oh yeah, I like the movement through all these as well.
And one of the reasons that we've put in the plants in first here is because the dry riverbed, we don't want any soil going into that.
Okay.
So that we bring in the slate and the glass and it looks nice and fresh. I think it looks absolutely fantastic at the moment. But there's still a lot more work to do. Now, I wonder what Chris is up to. I bet he's having coffee in the potting shed.
God, the chance would be a fine thing. Honestly, you should see the list of jobs that they've left. All heavy stuff. Fatsia japonica, free for a good home. This plant is hardy in most parts of the UK, but where it's a little bit windswept or maybe you're a little bit nervous about growing it, it's a good idea to keep it in a pot. In fact, that applies to anything, doesn't it? Keep it in a container, try it in various parts of the garden, and if it proves hardy, then transplant it. And this one, as you can see, it's slightly chlorotic, sort of yellowing of the foliage due to a lack of nutrient and also a lack of moisture in this terracotta container. So we thought it was high time to plant it out in the garden, which prompted us to think, well, is it possible to create in these climes a garden, or at least a border, which reflects something of the tropics? They're not necessarily plants from the tropics, but they give a kind of tropical feel. Bold foliage and lavish colours, a generosity in the way that they grow and mingle. Pack them all together and just see what happens. Not all of them are going to be hardy enough to stay outside. Some of them will need to be protected. Some of them, like the Ricinus communis here, is an annual. So you can sow it early in the season, plant it out, let it do its thing, and let the frosts cut it down. But the idea is, in a way, to travel the globe via the horticultural specimens in the border. So, for instance, the Fatzias from Japan, the Veratrum nigrum in here is, if I just move that out of the way, this is a curious little specimen. It's one of those plants which is related to Melianthus major over here. And although the berries are highly toxic, it does produce the most wonderful arching, lush green, striped foliage. Fabulous plant in a little cluster there. And then there are some plants which are really quite unusual. How about this? This is an Aralia. Now, you might be used to seeing Aralias with the spiny stems, the devil's walking stick, some people call them. Well, this is the California form of Aralia, Aralia californica. And although it does grow as a suckering shrub or small tree, if you're slightly nervous about its hardiness, then it's a good idea to get a specimen which has got several stems on it. And if it gets cut down in the winter, it doesn't really matter, because it will reshoot and you'll end up with a coppice of stems. And then up to the cannas. Well, this whole batch of cannas is a mixed bag of plants that we've rescued from around the garden. We potted them up in the autumn, kept them well fed and watered in a cool glass house through the winter, and you can see they're already in flower. So well worth putting them out and then taking them in again during the autumn and winter. And all of these plants, we're just going to see how they perform and really just give them the best chance. If you're keeping plants in a pot, I'm going back to my seaweed drench, because in a week or so, all of this chlorotic foliage will have returned to a lovely, lush, dark green colour. And as for everything else, the trick, of course, is to keep all these plants well fed and well watered. They're not going to cause you too much problem. In fact, the more food and water you put on, the bigger they're going to get. And the only thing you have to watch out for is your garden big enough to cope with the exuberance of planting? There's a fair few to get in here. I wonder if they've started planting at the hospital.
Work has moved on apace here at the Royal Aberdeen Children's Hospital. Most of the hard landscaping has been completed, and there's another army of volunteers have arrived to start with the planting.
Underneath the elephants, Jim.
This is true. But I tell you what, on every building site I've ever been on, whether it's a private house or a school or wherever it is, we get the problems, don't we?
We do. What we've discovered is basically with the diggers, all those heavy vehicles, you get this pan. So the top couple of inches is fine, and then it's absolutely
hides a
solid.
multitude of sins, doesn't it? You go into your new house and you think, oh, magic.
Yes.
And then you find a pan like that. There, Callum's been laying into that with a mattock.
And preparation is so important.
There's nothing wrong with the soil. It's just that it's been so compacted.
And the beautiful thing about this site is there's been so many donations. We've got extra plants. So those little plants there, things like the thrift, are going to go in.
Around the fringe?
Yes, and then we're going to have sort of wild flowers, a bit of wild grass, you know.
Yes.
The elephants will be at home.
Yes, indeed. Suitably fertilised grass. These guys are all planting into a mixture of native soil, imported topsoil and compost, and it makes a lovely mix, but it'll take a wee while to settle down. Now then, chaps, are you enjoying the work in the sunshine?
Yeah, it's very fun.
And how does this compare with the soil in your own garden?
My garden's got quite heavy clay soil, so it's quite light in comparison.
But no, this is looking good, and I guess that, in fact, it's this wee bit of the service to the community thing that you guys are interested in.
Yes.
But we might make a garden of you yet. Get stuck into it. Go on.
Okay, thank you.
always good to have one or two trees in your garden, and here we've got a cherry plum, but you know what's really important when you buy a specimen like this? It does need to be staked, and this is a great way to stake your tree at an angle. So in other words, that is not going through the root at all, it's not disturbing the root ball. At the same time, it's slightly lower down the stem. That means the top can move in the wind and then the roots can grow. We've got a nice rowan here, that still needs to be staked. At the moment that bamboo cane is just temporary. The nice thing about rowans though, they're going to produce fruit, and that's going to encourage the birds, the wildlife into the garden. And then how about this one? It's a magnolia, it's a mature shrub. It needs staking as well. Just because of the size of it, it would move in the wind. You can't see it though, and this is what we've done, is imagine the root ball's about this size. There's been 4 stakes gone down at the corners of the root ball, and then 2 pieces of wood put across, and they've been screwed in. That's going to be very secure.
Here's a thought for you. We're building a huge project here, a garden, but it's not like building a supermarket. All the shelves don't have to be filled on the same day, on day one, and all the trolleys with it. A garden evolves, and you've got to allow it to do so. I expect this garden will change with time. For example, here we have lots and lots of turfed banks. They are going to be expensive and time-consuming to maintain and keep them tidy. And over time, I would expect, and I would have thought it would add to the interest in the season if parts of these banks were covered in daffodils, naturalised, needing a lot less maintenance. It's a thought for the future.
6-7 weeks ago it was a building site, and now we've got all these people and a beautiful creation, and hopefully people can enjoy it.
It's good fun because there's nice people to work with and you get to learn new things.
It's an ideal environment to complement the lovely environment that we've got inside the hospital.
I think, you know, if you've got some green, you know, nice green space to look out on, it does make such a difference. You know, there'll be lots of different colours and things like that for them to look out on as well, rather than, you know, building works and fences and things. It just makes such a difference having the garden instead.
Instead of just walking into a medical institution, you're walking into an environment that shows that people care. That must translate into the fact that you're going to go into a place where people care about the kids. We're growing out here. The whole purpose of a children's hospital is to keep kids growing well. And I think that theme of growth, nourishment is perfect. What could be better?
We're fortunate to have with us today Malcolm Wright, who is CEO of NHS Grampian. Are you chuffed that this is happening in your watch?
I am absolutely delighted with it. I think the quality of work that's gone on here is just fantastic, and we're so grateful to the Archie Foundation for all the fundraising they've done on our behalf. So, you know, it's just a huge thank you to everybody.
The entrance to the Children's Hospital is just above me, so if you want to come into the garden, this is the first border that you come to. And well, it's very busy, there's lots going on, it's really quite joyous because you've got bright colours like the lupins, the geums, and also interest 12 months of the year with things like the box balls. I mean, that's a bit of fun. It's also a sensory experience because we've got things like the Choicea tonata, that's the Mexican orange blossom, and lots of herbs. This is one of my favourites, lemon balm. That's a beautiful smell of lemon, and of course those herbs also have healing properties. So that is fun, but at the same time when you come into the garden, maybe you just want to sit down and relax, and then you look onto this border, which is extremely calming.
Well, the troops are busy putting the last touches to a bit of turfing, and there's a lot of turf being laid in this area, and we've got a beating down sun, and the turf sitting there and it's getting very dry. Well, it's fine to work with when it's like that because it's lighter. Once it's out, come evening, get the sprinklers on it and give it a real good soaking if you're in the same boat at the moment. Usually our weather helps us with that, with a few showers, but don't take a risk. Have the sprinklers ready.
Jake, this recycled glass, it's absolutely appropriate for this dry riverbed.
It's a cracking show here, a colour. It's quite a tactile product, and bear in mind where we are at the Children's Hospital, it's something that's going to entice the children to come and stand at that bridge and look up this dry riverbed.
It's perfectly safe, there's no sort of sharp edges, and it looks like water at the moment. It's really glinting in the sunshine.
The natural idea is the different shades and the sheen and the glint that you see.
I think it's absolutely stunning, but, you know, let's go back to the plants. I mean, a lovely contrast there with the blue and the sort of maroon of the heuchera.
Yeah, I mean, it shows up good against the beech stone, and that's going to develop and get quite a lush foliage down here, the hostas as well. And then we've got a bit of form with
lots of spiky plants.
Aye, it's important to see that difference with the yucca, things like the phormium, the grasses, and then moving to our left where it gets quite a lush foliage, moving over to the elephants.
And you've also got interest, you know, you thought about it again for 12 months of the year. That's
well, it's important. It'll be used 12 months a year, so we've got, you know, the hellebores and the sedums and all these things to spread interest through as well.
I think we should crack on though, I'm quite enjoying doing this. After a massive effort from hordes of volunteers, the garden is coming together, and you can see how this will have a therapeutic and healing effect.
You know, if you were looking for evidence as to why it's worth going to the trouble of fan training a cherry in a cold fruit house, then this must surely be it. It's Sweetheart, in full flow, almost ripe too. Great crop this year. But if you haven't got the space for something like that, then how about this one? This is Celeste, planted 2 years ago from a single stem. And remember, we've been pruning this one back. You can see where we stunted back all of the growth. So just a short amount, and then flower and let the fruit set. Very, very compact. It's a stunning performance, and the fruit is, well, just about ripe, isn't it? Do you think I should try one? You know what they say, cat's away. Anyway, that's goodbye from the garden, but the final goodbye has to come from the hospital. These are delicious.
Well, so ends our visit to this fantastic project. And by jingo, the old saying is that if people can actually pull together, they can move mountains. Well, this lot here have moved mountains of soil, mountains of plants, and they've made a fantastic job. We're absolutely chuffed to bits. Well done, all of you.
It is a fantastic new resource for Aberdeen. What can I say apart from that? Also, we are going to be back in the garden next week. We've been away for several weeks, Jim. I think the weeds will probably have grown. But from everybody here at the Children's Hospital, goodbye!